When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Cobbler. User, NotStonedX. Posted, December 26, 1996.
Every Christmas, my stepmom Claire used to make cranberry peach cobbler. The whole family loved it. In fact, they would spend the whole year before and after having it, raving about how they couldn't wait for next Christmas. You might ask, couldn't she make it on a day other than Christmas? And the answer was no, because she thought Christmas was special, and special days needed special desserts. It's part of her whole domestic goddess superhostess thing. As with so many other things in my family, I was the odd one out on the cobbler situation. To me, with the red cranberries and orange peaches mushed together, bleeding over into the yellow cake, it looked like something you'd cough up if you were dissolving from the inside. I would eat it though. Each year I'd choke down enough forkfuls of the stuff to clear my plate, because otherwise, Claire would lose her mind. A year ago, Christmas was shaping up to be like every other one we'd had since Mom died. Everyone would gather at our place: Mom, Dad, my older brother Aaron and his wife Jill, Aunt Rhonda, and her gross husband Gary. Gary had a knack for finding women with low self-esteem who'd been treated badly by other men. He was good-looking, so if you didn't know him well, you might think he was a catch. Made good money, belonged to the right clubs, always dressed in expensive polos and slacks, the sort of guy who could rub his wife's back while undressing you with his eyes from across the table. Were you 18, 14? It didn't matter to gross Gary. Dad was sitting at the head of the table, Claire's empty chair next to his left while she puttered in the kitchen. My seat was at Dad's right hand, with Aaron next to me, followed by Jill. The place card with Gary's name was at the foot of the table, but he'd chosen to sit beside Claire, putting Rhonda in his place instead. I could feel his eyes on me and shifted uncomfortably in my seat. "So Robin," Gary used, "how's school going? You must be a senior soon, right?" I shot him a look that, if there was a God, would have killed him where he sat. Instead, his smile widened just a hair. "Robin," Dad said, "Uncle Gary asked you a question." Uncle Gary, my ass. I'd die before I'd call him that. I cleared my throat and looking toward the kitchen door, hoping to see Claire coming through with the turkey. "It's good, thanks." I looked toward Dad, who obviously expected me to say more. I sighed. Gary laughed. I get it. You kids don't want to tell us old folks about all the trouble you're up to. I was a kid myself too, you know, and let me tell you, we got up to trouble." I thought I was the only person at the table to see the leer in his eyes, but Jill spoke so quickly I knew she'd seen it too. "Rhonda, do you and Gary have any vacations planned for the spring?" My aunt's answer was interrupted by the kitchen door whooshing open, followed by Claire in her Martha Stewart-approved green stretch velvet dress. She was carrying our turkey, cooked to an annoyingly photo-perfect golden brown, a thick plug of her homemade stuffing poking out its rear end. Claire took in the table and frowned at Gary's choice of seating. "Gary, you're in Rhonda's chair." Gary chuckled, setting my teeth on edge. "Rhonda likes to sit at the foot of the table, don't you, baby? You like the room." Rhonda nodded, smiling. "Yes, I do. I like having the room. You don't mind terribly, do you, Claire?" I could tell Claire minded very much, more and more with each passing second, but Dad placed a hand on her arm. It was like flipping a switch, and her expression changed to one of a perfect holiday hostess. "Of course not, Rhonda. That's fine." She placed the heavy turkey down on the table with an emphatic thump rattling our silverware. The look of good cheer on her face was tight enough I half expected it to split as she took her napkin and folded it neatly in half before placing it in her lap. Claire turned to Dad. "Thomas, dear, won't you say?" Before she could finish her sentence, a strange thing happened. The air around us began to ripple like heat shimmer on asphalt. I thought it was me, then Aaron turned to Jill and said, "I think the edibles are kicking in." "I see it too. That was Dad. What the fuck is it?" "Gary." Then, all at once, I heard a whooshing sound similar to when Claire opened the kitchen door, but louder, coming from everywhere. My heart sank as if I was back at the coaster on Six Flags and it had just dropped 100 feet. I looked at my legs, trying not to be sick. Everyone at the table made some kind of noise that made me realize we were all experiencing the same thing. When I looked up again, the shimmer was gone. Dad stood up. What in God's name was that? I pointed to the turkey, slapping my clueless father on the arm. "Dad!" It was shaking, side to side, the stuffing in its rump vibrating wildly. With a pop, the plug of bread and meat fired out of the turkey's ass straight into Gary's face. It was so fast it could have been fired out of a potato gun. His nose crunched, squirting drops of blood onto the white tablecloth. Chorus of screams from around the table, Aaron and Jill pushing themselves back. Rhonda went to comfort Gary, who pushed her back so hard she fell out of her chair. "What is that?" I'd never heard Claire sound this way before, as frightened as she was furious. She was pointing at the turkey now, too, albeit for a different reason. A tiny, nude fat man with long white hair was climbing out of the hole which had recently held her stuffing, the greasy turkey skin clinging to his pale white body. He made high-pitched grunting noises as his little arms tugged and strained to pull him free. Another pop, and he tumbled out onto the table. The man was the size of a grapefruit, his body so rotund it was practically a square, with legs at least twice as thick as his arms. Everyone was screaming now, Claire especially. The little fat man made his chirping sounds as he righted himself, standing to his full height, belly drooping down over his groin. I couldn't understand what I was looking at. Something that small should be cute, but this little guy was anything but. If the sensation of touching the gunk in a sink drain had a physical form, I realized this is what it would look like, and he looked mad. The gnome reached inside the turkey's now yawning anus, and over my family's panic, I heard a cracking sound. His hand emerged holding a sliver of what could only be bone. Sickening glee stole over the little man's face. With a bird-like cry, he launched himself at the still bleeding Gary, gripping onto his polo like a mountain climber. The gnome started stabbing whatever was in reach, which, unfortunately for Gary, happened to be his throat. With a triumphant trill, the bone finally found Gary's carotid, a gout of blood spurting so far it left a ribbon of red drooling down Claire's green Christmas dress. Rhonda cried Gary's name and tried to reach for him, but the little man stabbed at her hand. She shrieked and drew it back. The gnome chittered and went back to ripping holes into Gary's face and neck as he slowly went gray. I never saw it coming, and neither did the fat little murderer. A silver blur swung down, knocking him off Gary onto the ruined white tablecloth next to the overturned turkey. Claire had clocked him with the serving tray, and she was winding up for another shot. She screamed as she brought it down on the dazed gnome over and over. Absolutely fucking not. Clang after clang as she beat the tiny horror into a pulp. This is my Christmas dinner. Hits came harder, faster. Clangs gave way to a soft, squelchy sound. I don't know how long it went on for, just that when it was done, Claire was panting and the gnome had been reduced to goo in the center of our table. Red, orange, and yellow all mushed together. I tilted my head, damned if it didn't look just like cranberry and peach cobbler.
Subject: Christmas with Creech. User: Fireflow12. Posted December 29th, 1999.
Every religion believes theirs is the only way to heaven. Believe this, say that, harass strangers just trying to live their lives, and at the end of it all awaits an admit one pass to what sounds like the lamest amusement park on earth. Me, I found another way to heaven, and it doesn't involve bothering a single living soul. 500 datura seeds. What is datura, you ask? It's a lovely little bell-shaped flower you might have heard referred to as Jimson weed or devil's trumpet or moonflower. Those names alone should clue you in to the fact this is something you take when you want to get some distance from yourself and do a little psychedelic introspection. Datura grows wild down here in SoCal. As far as plant-based therapy goes, it would never be my first choice or fifth, but I have a psychonaut friend, Grant, who loves this stuff. He'll take day trips to go and pick jars full, drying the seeds out in one of his spare trailers. Besides being a total fiend for hallucinogens, Grant also has a healthy business selling them and other chemical enhancements from a trailer park off the PCH in Santa Monica. To roll into that place with its peeling paint and macrame plant hangers, you'd think the trailers were all owned by a bunch of old heads living off the fumes of 60s-era trust funds. Instead, it's just one old head and row after row of empty houses stuffed with hydroponic setups. Last year, when my girlfriend Rita kicked me out of our place just before Christmas because she needed room to think, Grant let me crash with him. "You'll sleep better in a grow than you will anywhere else," is what he always says. Whatever mojo a room full of cannabis plants might have had for Grant didn't extend to me. I spent sleepless night after sleepless night wondering where I'd gone wrong in my relationship. In the great tradition of love-struck idiots throughout time, I thought it might be clarifying to have a conversation with the woman I did not yet realize was my ex-girlfriend. It took a late-night visit during which I found a roofless douchemobile in my old driveway to clue me in that her time might be up. A furtive peek through the living room window confirmed that suspicion. Drug dealers get the luxury of making their own hours, so Grant was always awake on those long nights when sleep wouldn't come, and I spent a lot of time at his place, talking about my situation. That's why, instead of going home to my trailer that night, I went to Grant's. I don't know how much interaction you've had with the retailers of certain substances, but they're much better talkers than they are listeners. When you've got the drugs, everyone else has to put up with your insane rambling about secret societies of serial killers if they want to get them. When I walked in that night, I was inconsolable and Grant was at his limit. He stalked into his spare room, coming out with a jar full of tiny black seeds. "We're going to the Ocean Club," he said. "Right fucking now." The Ocean Club is a members-only, after-hours spot overlooking the water, kind of a local secret. It was only a 20-minute walk across the highway and down the beach from Grant's place, but he hated walking. Instead, he told me to get into the passenger seat of his van, and once we were both inside, he tossed the small jar my way. "Okay, Robbie, here's what we're gonna do. You can stay in my trailer as long as you want. I don't give a shit because, hey, I got the space, but this mooning over your ex shit has got to stop. I'm sick to death of it, and I'm high all the time, you understand? All the time, and it still gets through." He fired the van's engine into life and backed out of his driveway, aiming us toward the PCH. That there in your hot little hand is a jar of Datura seeds. I know you don't like this stuff. Tough shit. For the psychic weight you're hauling around, it's the only thing gonna cure you. Take a handful. We'll go to the Ocean Club. You can trip a little while I get tequila drunk. How does that sound? I looked at the seeds. They looked like pitted black stones. "Look, Grant, I appreciate everything you've done for me, okay? And I'm sorry for being such a whiny little bitch. I can't really afford this." He looked over at me like I'd just taken a shit on his mandala. "Afford? Fuck you, afford. This is medicine. You're my friend. Besides, these are old, so the strength isn't what it used to be. Just eat the fucking things and everything will look better, I promise." To my right, the Pacific Ocean was black glass, rolling in over and over under a starry sky. If you don't come from LA, Christmas here is weird. It's shorts weather, and yet everything is covered in garland and twinkling lights. Good weird, but still. When the beach club was in sight, I unscrewed the lid and poured the seeds into my mouth. There were a lot of them, so it took a couple mouthfuls, but I got them down. We parked and had gotten halfway across the lot before he told me over his shoulder to just keep the rest in case this first dose didn't work. "Rest," I said. "I ate them all." He stopped short, his shoe skidding in gravel as he wheeled on me. "You fucking what?" "I ate them all, man. You told me to." I said eat a handful, a fucking handful. 5 seeds maybe, 10 at most. Robbie, there were 500 in that jar. I started to sweat. How bad is that? How the hell should I know? The most I've ever taken was 50, and that was... He must have seen the look of fear on my face. He puts his hands up, trying to calm me down. Fine, it was fine, okay? It wasn't fine, but it was manageable, and those were fresh seeds. The ones you had were old enough, you might not feel anything at all. I sighed in relief. Really? Sure, really. I'm really sure. Let's go get a drink and everything will be fine. It was not fine. Within 30 minutes of entering the Ocean Club's neon-soaked interior, I felt I might actually be dying. The Pepsi in front of me was untouched, my stomach hurt, my vision was getting blurry, and there was a strange prickling sensation in my brain as if someone was poking around in there with a feather duster. When my insides started vibrating, Grant was off in the far corner playing pool with Fat Chris, a drug dealer from the valley who always said he came to Santa Monica to take the air like a Victorian housewife with consumption. My vision kept fuzzing out worse and worse, intensifying with each new vibration. I didn't want to die under neon lights, so without telling Grant, I left my drink on the table and beelined out the door. My plan was, I think, to walk back to the trailer. I made it about 60 feet down the beach before dropping face first into the still warm sand. Laying face down seemed to make the worst of my physical symptoms go away, so I tried rolling over onto my back. It was even better. I didn't feel sick at all. Opening my eyes, I gazed into the night sky to see the most incredible thing. More than just endless stars, it looked as though there was an entire other world above me, pink and blue nebula laid out in glittering brushstrokes. I'd never seen anything like it and stood up, my head craned back. From horizon to horizon, the sky was full of constellations and gaseous shapes I'd never seen. Ahead of me, I saw a tall figure in scuba gear, stomping up out of the water. It turned to look at me, its mask-covered face hidden. The figure cocked its head quizzically, then raised the hand, not holding on to its flippers as if in greeting. I did the same, trying not to let on that I could see the long curve of the beach right through its body, as if it were only a shadow. The figure nodded, then continued walking up toward the parking lot until it faded away. The sky continued to swirl and transform. Without the scuba diver to divert my attention, I realized the entire beach was full of similar shades and all different shapes and sizes. In the distance, a group of frat boys were tossing around a football as two men, one of them in a ski mask, looked on and talked between them. Ski Mask was shaking his head as if he was trying to make an emphatic point until the other man placed a hand on his shoulder. After that, they watched the game in silence. I began walking down the beach, feeling better than I ever had. Even when a rogue wave appeared, faster than lightning, to dump an indescribable monster onto the sand, it couldn't wreck my high. The thing gathered itself upright, and when I sensed it looking toward me, I waved. Since it didn't have anything I recognized as eyes, I didn't know it had even seen me until I heard a voice. Well, heard isn't quite right. I thought in a voice that wasn't my own. "You can see me?" It was the monster. Monster seems harsh. You should see some of the other things living down there. Now those are monsters. I blinked. It was my turn to be surprised. "Wait, you can hear my thoughts?" The creature shambled forward. "Hearing thoughts is easy. You guys used to be able to do it too, but they've been working on you a long time. It's kind of sad when you think about it." My mind was overloaded with questions. "We'll get to your questions," it said. "First, I want answers. How can you see me? You guys shouldn't even be able to do that when you're high." I shrugged. I ate 500 datura seeds. The creature let out a shocked noise I couldn't approximate if I tried for 100 years. "That'll do it. How are you not dead?" "Maybe I am." It shook a part of its body that couldn't possibly have been its head, but I got the impression it was trying to say no. Even the dead don't usually see me. "What are you exactly?" "That's complicated. You keep calling me creature in your head, and while I can't say I love it, it's as close as we're gonna get you without breaking your mind completely. Just call me Creech for short." Out on the ocean, a see-through surfer rode a wave the size of an office building. "Creech, what's happening to me?" "You gotta cross the divide. Most living people don't get to do that. Even the DMT assholes never make it past GZA." "What's GZA?" Creech did a full body shake I took to be the dismissal of my question. "You're higher than anyone's ever been, is what you are. So high you bumped your head on the ceiling of the world. I shouldn't tell you any more than that. What I want to know is why you took 500 datura seeds." I felt sheepish and turned my head away. Talking about a broken heart seemed trivial under the circumstances. My girlfriend Rita dumped me a little while ago. We'd been living together for a couple years, and I haven't been handling it well. A friend of mine gave me the seeds to try and help me work through it. I Took too many. Creech made a burbling, oily sound I think was laughter. A tale as old as time. Have they helped? The seeds, I mean? Well, I said, I've only been here a little while. Kid, how much of eternity do you need to see before you recognize the insignificance of a single 2-year-long relationship? Yeah, that's fair. All right, you better get back to your body before GZA figures out you're here. I wasn't kidding about that part, and you don't need to know what it is to know you should avoid it. You think looking at me is rough. You got no idea. My body? Creech extended part of himself in a sort of pointing gesture. I turned to follow his line of sight and saw a skinny guy with sandy blonde hair sprawled out on the sand. Oh. I took another look at the multicolored vista above me. Creech, can I ask you one last question? Sure, hit me. If I'm human and you're whatever you are, why can we understand each other? Again, Creech made that laughter-adjacent gurgling. It's your trip, kid. You tell me. There was a rushing sound, and my eyes snapped open as I lay prone on the beach, sucking in a breath. A second later, I was vomiting up the contents of my stomach, primarily tiny pitted black seeds. After what felt like an eternity, I was myself again, except lighter. Unsteadily, I got to my feet before looking around at the empty beach, then up at the black canvas of stars above. That had been one hell of a trip. I slowly started my walk back toward the Ocean Club when something caught my eye. Where I'd been laying, there was an imprint of my body in the sand. Just behind that was a semicircular flourish one might argue was left by my hand as it fell. The angle wasn't quite right, but if you needed a rational explanation, that was a good one. To me, it looked as if someone standing over me had carefully marked out the shape of the letter C. Merry Christmas, Creech.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.